The great chamber of the Galactic Council was silent. It was the kind of silence that came before storms, before wars, before someone said something that could not be taken back. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated seats, arranged in a massive circle that rose up like the inside of a bowl. Lights of different colors floated above each delegation, marking their place in the assembly. Some beings breathed oxygen, others methane, and a few did not breathe at all. But today they all shared one thing in common. They were angry at the humans. Ambassador of the Dominion stood at the center podium. He was tall, almost 8 feet, with 4 arms and skin that looked like polished blue stone. His 4 eyes, arranged in a diamond pattern on his face, were all focused on a small group of beings sitting at the far end of the chamber. The humans. There were only 5 of them. They looked soft, fragile, and entirely too calm for beings who were about to face the judgment of the galaxy. Raised one of his hands, and a massive holographic display flickered to life behind him. Words and images began to scroll across it, each one a record of something humanity had done wrong since joining the coalition 3 years ago. 17 treaty violations, said, his voice carrying through the chamber like the sound of grinding rocks. 43 unauthorized colonizations, 106 instances of cultural contamination on worlds that had not yet developed space travel, and the complete collapse of the Ani currency market, which took 14 years to stabilize. Murmurs spread through the assembly. The Ani delegate, a small being covered in golden fur, made a sound of distress at the memory. That economic crash had affected half the galaxy. Billions of beings had lost their savings overnight, and it had all started because some human traders had discovered something called day trading, worked really well with alien stock markets. Continued reading from the list. Illegal distribution of cultural materials to pre-contact civilizations. The introduction of a substance called coffee which caused mass addiction and social disruption. The incident on Station Thadonine where human tourists somehow started a religious movement by accident. And this. He gestured, and an image appeared on the screen. It showed a beautiful gas giant, one of the most sacred sights in culture. Someone had painted a massive smiley face on its largest moon. This was done last month. The delegation made sounds of outrage. That moon had been a pilgrimage site for 10,000 years. Now it had a yellow circle with 2 dots and a curved line on it, visible from space. We have tried to be patient, said. We welcomed humanity into our coalition because we believed in the potential of all intelligent species. We thought that with guidance, they would learn our ways, respect our customs, and become valued members of our community. He paused. We were wrong. He turned to face the human delegation directly. Ambassador, your species has 3 options. 1. You provide a satisfactory explanation for every single one of these incidents and agree to strict monitoring of all human activities for the next 100 years. 2. You accept immediate expulsion from the coalition and the quarantine of your home system. 3. We proceed to a vote on more severe measures. He did not say what those measures were. He did not need to. Everyone in the chamber knew that the coalition had the power to make species disappear from history if they were deemed dangerous enough. The humans did not seem worried. That was the strangest thing. The other delegates had expected fear, panic, maybe desperate bargaining. Instead, the human ambassador was whispering something to her aide, a young man who looked like he was about to be sick. Then she stood up. Ambassador was not impressive by galactic standards. She was of average height for a human, with dark hair pulled back in a simple style and brown eyes that seemed to notice everything. She wore a plain black suit, no decorations, no symbols of rank beyond a small pin on her collar. She looked like someone who had attended too many meetings and had stopped caring about making an impression long ago. But when she walked to the center podium, something changed in the chamber. It was nothing obvious, just a slight shift in attention, a feeling that something important was about to happen. Even the silence monks, who had not spoken in a formal session for 11 centuries, leaned forward slightly. Looked at, then at the holographic display still showing humanity's crimes, then at the assembled delegates of the galaxy. She took a breath. "Distinguished members of the council," she began. Her voice was calm, almost pleasant. "I want to start by saying that I understand your frustration. I really do. Looking at this list, I can see why you might think that humanity is either deliberately trying to cause problems or is too stupid to be allowed in space." She paused. "I want to assure you that neither of those things is true." Made a skeptical sound. "Then what is the truth, Ambassador?" Smiled. It was a strange smile, one that did not quite reach her eyes. "The truth is simple. We have an excuse for everything on that list. A perfectly reasonable, completely honest excuse that explains every single incident." "Then share it," demanded. "Explain how your species managed to cause so much chaos in such a short time." Nodded. She looked around the chamber one more time, making eye contact with as many delegates as she could. Though with their sharp spines and nervous dispositions, the crystalline beings of the hegemony who had existed since before most stars were born, the methane breathers of the outer rim, watching through specially designed tanks, the energy beings, the hive minds, the uploaded consciousnesses, all of them waiting. "The excuse," said, "is that we are new at this." The silence that followed was different from before. It was confused. Several delegates looked at each other, uncertain if they had heard correctly, even seemed taken aback. "New," he repeated. "New," confirmed. "Young, inexperienced, still learning. We have been a spacefaring species for about 200 of our years. That is nothing compared to any of you that have been in space for 40,000 years. The 60,000. The crystalline hegemony existed before our sun finished forming." She spread her hands. "We are children here, and children make mistakes." The chamber erupted into noise. Delegates shouted, made sounds of disbelief, demanded clarification, but just stood there, waiting, that strange smile still on her face. She was not finished, not even close. The noise in the chamber took several minutes to die down. Delegates were talking over each other, some in languages that the translation system struggled to process. The ambassador's spines were fully extended in agitation. The Ani representative was making high-pitched sounds of distress. Even the normally calm crystalline hegemony delegate had developed a slight crack in their outer shell from stress. Ambassador Eth of the Silence Monks did something that had not happened in over 1,000 years. He spoke in a formal session. "What?" he said, just that one word, but it was enough to bring silence back to the chamber. Everyone turned to look at him, shocked that he had broken his vow. Eth did not seem to care. He was staring at the human ambassador with an expression that was hard to read on his eyeless face. Remained calm. She stood at the podium as if she had expected exactly this reaction. "I know it sounds like a weak excuse," she said, "but please let me explain what I mean." She gestured, and a small holographic display appeared in front of her. It showed a blue and green planet, beautiful and fragile-looking against the black of space. "Earth. This is our home," said. "We evolved there about 300,000 years ago, though we only started building civilizations around 10,000 years back. We invented writing maybe 5,000 years ago. We figured out that our planet went around our sun, not the other way around, only about 500 years ago. And we have been in space for just 2 centuries. She looked at. "How long did it take your species to go from first flight to interstellar travel?" Hesitated. "Approximately 12,000 years, he admitted. "And the ambassador rustled his spines. 8,000 years. "The crystalline hegemony." High arbiter pulsed with light. "We do not measure time the same way, but by your standards, approximately 20,000 years. Nodded. "Humanity did it in less than 200. We went from wooden ships that used wind to cross our oceans, to rockets that could reach our moon, to faster-than-light travel, in the same amount of time it takes some of your species to agree on what to have for dinner." She paused to let that sink in. "We did not have time to learn how to do things properly. We just did them." She pulled up the list of treaty violations on her display. These 17 violations. We genuinely misunderstood the treaties. Do you have any idea how many languages we had to translate your documents through before we could read them? Our planet has over 7,000 different languages. We have spent most of our history not being able to understand each other. When we got your treaties, we did our best, but things got lost in translation. Literally. The delegate who had replaced an older being named or spoke up, and the unauthorized colonizations. Your star maps use a coordinate system based on pulsar positions measured from the center of the galaxy, explained. Very elegant, very precise, but we had never seen anything like it before. We have been using a system based on lines we drew on our own planet for most of our history. Latitude and longitude, we call it. When we tried to convert your maps to something we could understand, we made errors. We genuinely thought those systems were unclaimed. By the time we realized our mistake, there were already colonies there with people living in them. She moved to the next item on the list. The cultural contamination incidents. Yes, those were our fault, but we did not do them on purpose. When we made contact with the pre-civilization on 4, their young ones saw our food and asked what it was. We told them. We did not know that sharing recipes counted as cultural contamination under coalition law. On Earth, sharing food is how we make friends. It is one of the most basic things we do. A murmur went through the chamber. Several delegates seemed to be reconsidering their anger, though many still looked skeptical. And the coffee incident on the ambassador demanded. You introduced an addictive substance to our population. Winced slightly. That one I can explain but not excuse. Coffee is something we drink every day on Earth. Most humans are addicted to it. We did not realize it would affect your species the same way. When our traders offered it as a gift, they thought they were being friendly. They had no idea it would cause problems. You are addicted to it yourselves, the ambassador asked, sounding horrified. Most of us, yes, we have a saying, don't talk to me before I've had my coffee. It means that we cannot function properly until we have consumed the substance. Shrugged. We have a lot of things like that. Coffee, tea, chocolate, alcohol. We regularly consume substances that affect our brain chemistry and make us feel different. It is normal for us. The chamber fell silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of beings trying to process information that did not fit into their understanding of how the universe worked. High Arbiter spoke, their crystalline form pulsing with confusion. You are saying that your species regularly poisons itself for enjoyment. If you want to put it that way, yes. And this is considered normal. Completely normal. We have entire industries built around it. Some of our most important historical events happened because of these substances. Wars have been fought over tea. Empires were built on the trade of spices that affect our brain chemistry. One of our most celebrated holidays involves consuming large amounts of alcohol and making poor decisions. Or leaned forward. Ambassador, I must ask, how has your species survived long enough to reach space? Laughed. It was a short, honest laugh, the kind that came from hearing a question she had asked herself many times. That is an excellent question. I do not have a good answer. By all logic, we should not be here. We have done so many things that should have killed us all. But somehow we keep going. We survive. We adapt. We make mistakes, terrible mistakes, and then we figure out how to fix them. Usually. Usually, repeated. Sometimes we just get lucky. Looked around the chamber. I know this sounds like a bad excuse. We are new at this. We did not know better. I know it does not fix the problems we have caused, but it is the truth. We are not trying to destabilize your coalition. We are not trying to cause chaos. We are just being human. And apparently being human means making a lot of mistakes along the way. The delegates exchanged looks. Some seemed unconvinced. Others seemed to be thinking. And a few, just a few, seemed to be looking at the humans with something that might have been the beginning of understanding. But was not done. The excuse was only the beginning. The evidence was coming next. Ambassador had returned to his seat, having received medical attention for what the doctors called stress-induced shell softening. But he was not ready to accept the human excuse. None of the council was. Words were easy. Anyone could say they made mistakes because they were young and inexperienced. The council needed proof. "Your explanation is convenient," said, his voice still carrying an edge of anger despite his weakened condition. "But how do we know this is true? How do we know humanity is not simply pretending to be foolish while secretly working toward some larger goal?" Nodded as if she had expected this question. She turned to her aide, the young man named who had been sitting very still and hoping nobody would notice him. She said, "Pull up the file." Went pale. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for his data pad. "Ambassador, are you sure? The council has not been psychologically prepared for this. Our own diplomatic corps requires 3 weeks of counseling before viewing this material." The file. "Ma'am, I really think we should warn them first. Some species here have hearts that can stop from shock. Others have crystalline structures that can fracture under emotional stress. They have been known to spontaneously shed their spines when confronted with disturbing information, and I do not think the cleaning staff is prepared for." His voice was quiet but firm. "The file." Swallowed hard. He tapped his data pad. The holographic display behind flickered and changed, now showing the title screen of what appeared to be a very long presentation. The title read, "Human History, a Summary of Self-Inflicted Near-Extinction Events." Distinguished members of the council said, "What you are about to see is a collection of true events from human history. Nothing has been exaggerated. Nothing has been made up. If anything, we have left out some of the more disturbing incidents because we did not want to cause permanent psychological damage." She pressed a button. The presentation began. The first section covered something called the Great Emu War. The council learned that in the year 1932, the Australian military had been deployed to deal with a population of large birds that were destroying crops. The military had guns, machine guns in fact. They lost. The birds won. The campaign was officially considered a failure, and the emus continued to roam freely. The ambassador made a sound of confusion. "You fought a war against birds and lost." "They were very fast birds," said simply, "and there were a lot of them." The presentation continued. The council learned about a ship called the Titanic, which humans had declared unsinkable before its first voyage. It sank on its first voyage. They learned about a war that started because someone shot a single important person and somehow led to the deaths of nearly 20 million humans. They learned about another war, less than 30 years later, that killed even more. But the real shock came when showed them the nuclear weapons. "We invented these about 80 years before we discovered faster-than-light travel," she explained, as the holographic display showed the mushroom cloud of an atomic explosion. "They work by splitting atoms apart and releasing enormous amounts of energy. One weapon can destroy an entire city. We built thousands of them." The chamber was silent with horror. "And then," continued, "we pointed them at each other. For about 50 years, 2 groups of humans had enough of these weapons aimed at each other to destroy our entire planet several times over. We called it mutually assured destruction. The idea was that nobody would use the weapons because everyone would die." "That is insane," said, their crystalline form flickering with distress. "Yes," agreed. "It was, but it worked mostly. We only actually used them twice, both times on the same country within 3 days of each other." "You used weapons capable of destroying cities on your own planet?" Or asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We used them on ourselves, yes, on cities full of civilians, to end a war." Paused. "We tell ourselves it saved more lives than it took. We are still arguing about whether that is true." The presentation went on. The council learned about diseases that killed half of human populations because nobody washed their hands. They learned about an empire that fell partly because their water pipes were made of poison. They learned about economic collapses caused by people buying flowers for too much money, or houses for too much money, or imaginary internet money for too much money. They learned about a time when humans put lead, a deadly metal, in their gasoline, their paint, their food containers, and even their makeup, even though they knew it was poisonous. They did this for decades. They learned about something called the ozone hole, which humans accidentally created by using certain chemicals in their refrigerators and spray cans. When scientists warned them about it, many humans refused to believe it was real. They only fixed the problem after the hole grew large enough to threaten entire continents with increased radiation. They learned about climate change, which humans had known about for over a century and were still arguing about how to fix. Showed them graphs of rising temperatures, melting ice, and predictions of what Earth might look like in another 100 years if nothing changed. She also showed them the arguments some humans were making against doing anything about it. Your species knows your planet is becoming unable to support life, the ambassador said, and some of you still refuse to act. Some of us refuse to believe it is happening at all, said, even though we have been measuring it for generations. By the third hour of the presentation, several delegates had requested breaks for medical attention. The crystalline hegemony representative had developed visible cracks across their surface. The Ani delegate was curled into a ball of golden fur, making quiet distress sounds. The silence monks had broken their vow repeatedly, each time to say some variation of, "How are you still alive?" Showed them the incident where humans had transported rabbits to a continent that had never seen them before, leading to an ecological disaster that lasted over a century. She showed them the time humans had introduced a plant called kudzu to control erosion, only for the plant to eat entire forests. She showed them the concept of Florida man, which she declined to fully explain, saying only that it was a phenomenon best experienced in small doses. She showed them a picture of the smiley face painted on the sacred moon. This, she said, was done by a 22-year-old college student who thought it would be funny. He used a stolen cargo ship's exhaust systems and 3,000 gallons of reflective paint. It took him 6 hours. He is currently awaiting trial on Earth, and his defense is that he did not know the moon was sacred to anyone. He thought it was just a moon. Made a sound like breaking glass. He vandalized our most holy site because he thought it would be funny. Yes, and when he was arrested, his first question was whether the video of him doing it had gone viral. Paused. It had 3 billion views in the first week. The presentation ended. The chamber was silent except for the soft sounds of various beings trying to process what they had just seen. Stood at the podium, looking out at the traumatized representatives of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. So, she said, do you believe us now? The emergency recess lasted 8 hours. During that time, delegates contacted their home worlds. Scientists were consulted. Historians were woken from sleep. Religious leaders were asked difficult questions about the nature of the universe and whether it could really contain a species like humanity. Medical teams treated those who had been most affected by the presentation. The crystalline hegemony representative had to be carefully repaired by specialists who had never seen stress fractures of that magnitude in a being of pure crystal. When the council finally reconvened, the atmosphere in the chamber had changed completely. The anger was gone. In its place was something harder to name. It was fear, yes, but mixed with confusion, disbelief, and something that might have been the beginning of respect. High Arbiters spoke first. Their form had been repaired, but new fracture lines were already forming as they processed what they had learned. We have the human claims, said, each word carefully chosen. Our historians have reviewed the evidence. Our scientists have analyzed the data. Our psychologists have. They paused. Our psychologists have requested leave, several of them, indefinitely. A ripple of murmurs passed through the chamber. The human presentation was accurate, continued. If anything, we have discovered that they left things out. They did not mention the time they tried to build a canal across their continent and accidentally caused a disease outbreak that killed thousands. They did not mention the numerous incidents of cities being destroyed by fire started by cows kicking lanterns or bakers leaving ovens unattended. They did not mention their tendency to build cities in locations that are obviously prone to natural disasters and then act surprised when disasters happen. Nodded, we did not want to overwhelm you. You failed, said dryly. We are overwhelmed. The delegate stood slowly. Unlike who had been too angry to think clearly or was old and had seen much in his long life, but even he seemed shaken by what the council had learned. I have been a diplomat for 300 years, he said. I have negotiated with aggressive hive minds, suicidal death cults, and beings made of pure chaos energy. I have seen species that eat their young and species that believe the universe exists only as their dream. I thought I had encountered every possible type of alien mindset. He looked at the human delegation. I was wrong. He took a step toward. Ambassador, I need to understand something. How are you here? Not in this room, but in existence at all. The statistical probability of your species surviving long enough to develop space travel is so low that our mathematicians are calling it impossible. You should not exist. By every measure we have, humanity should have killed itself off long before reaching the stars. Considered the question. I do not have a good answer for that, she admitted. We ask ourselves the same thing sometimes. We look back at our history and we see all the times we almost ended everything, and we wonder how we made it through. The Cuban Missile Crisis, the plague, the time we almost caused nuclear war because of a flock of geese that our sensors mistook for incoming missiles. That happened, the ambassador asked, horrified. Twice, actually, different incidents, shrugged. We were lucky, or unlucky depending on how you look at it. We kept surviving despite our best efforts to destroy ourselves. Ambassador Eth of the Silence Monks rose from his seat. When he spoke, every being in the chamber fell silent. The Silence Monks had been in the coalition since its founding. They spoke only when something truly important needed to be said. For Eth to speak twice in one day was unprecedented. We have meditated on this matter, Eth said, his voice soft but carrying perfectly through the chamber. All of my order has meditated together for the first time in 4,000 years. We have reached a conclusion. He walked slowly toward the center of the chamber, his movements precise and deliberate. The humans are not dangerous because of what they do on purpose. They are not conquerors or destroyers by intention. They are dangerous because of what they are. He turned to face the assembly. Every other species in this coalition follows certain rules, not laws that we agreed to, but rules of the universe itself. We are born, we grow, we face challenges, and we either overcome them or we die. That is how existence works. That is how it has always worked. A species that makes too many mistakes is removed by natural selection. A civilization that cannot manage itself collapses. This is the balance of the cosmos. He pointed at, the humans break this rule. They make mistakes that should destroy them, and they survive. They create problems that should end their civilization, and they find ways to continue anyway. They are not governed by the same laws of probability that govern everyone else. The chamber was absolutely silent. Consider what this means, Eth continued. A species that cannot be killed by its own stupidity. A species that survives nuclear weapons aimed at itself. A species that can poison its own planet and still find ways to live. What happens when such a species encounters a problem that it cannot solve through luck alone? What happens when that desperate, impossible survival instinct is turned outward, toward the rest of the galaxy? Watched Eth with an unreadable expression. You are not a threat because of your weapons, Eth said, speaking directly to her now. You are not a threat because of your technology, which is primitive by our standards. You are a threat because you exist in a state of constant near destruction and somehow thrive. You have made survival into an art form. You have turned disaster into a way of life. He paused. And that makes you the most dangerous thing any of us have ever encountered." The words hung in the air, did not respond immediately. She seemed to be thinking, considering what the ancient monk had said. Finally she smiled. It was a small smile, almost sad. "You are right," she said. "You are absolutely right about everything. We should not exist. We break the rules just by being here. We are a statistical impossibility that keeps on going despite all evidence that we should have stopped long ago." She looked around the chamber. "But that is exactly why you need us." Or frowned. "Need you? Why would we need a species that brings chaos wherever it goes?" Smile grew slightly. "Because someday you are going to face a problem that follows all the rules. A problem that can be calculated and predicted and prepared for. And when that problem arrives, you are going to do everything right. You are going to use your ancient wisdom and your advanced technology and your perfect logic, and it will not be enough." She stepped forward. "And when that happens, you are going to need someone who does not play by the rules. Someone who survives the unsurvivable. Someone who looks at an impossible situation and says, 'We will figure it out somehow,' and then actually does." The chamber was silent. "That is what humanity brings to this coalition," said. "Not order, not logic, not ancient wisdom, just the stubborn refusal to die no matter what the universe throws at us." She straightened her shoulders. "Now, shall we discuss the terms of our continued membership?" The chamber was divided. Half the delegates wanted to expel humanity immediately, seal their system behind a quarantine field, and pretend they had never existed. The other half were not sure what they wanted, but they knew that Eth's words had struck something deep. The silence monks did not speak without reason. If Eth said humanity was dangerous, then they were dangerous. But if said humanity could be useful, that was worth considering too. High Arbiter called for order. The crystalline being's form pulsed with colors that indicated deep thought. "Ambassador," said, "you have presented your excuse. You have shown us evidence that, frankly, will give many of us nightmares for cycles to come. And now you suggest that humanity's chaos is somehow valuable. Explain." Nodded. She had been waiting for this moment. Everything before had been preparation. Now came the real argument. "Let me tell you about something that happened on Earth about 500 years ago," she began. "There was a disease spreading through one of our continents, a terrible plague that killed millions. Our doctors did not know what caused it. They did not understand germs or bacteria or any of the things that now seem obvious. They tried everything they could think of: bleeding patients, burning herbs, praying to various gods. Nothing worked." She paused. And then one doctor had an idea. He noticed that milkmaids, women who worked with cows, almost never got the disease. He did not know why. He did not understand the science. But he took fluid from the sores on a sick cow and injected it into a healthy child to see what would happen. The ambassador made a sound of horror. He experimented on a child. He did, and it worked. The child did not get the disease. The doctor had invented vaccination without understanding why it worked. He saved millions of lives through an experiment that was, by any reasonable standard, completely insane. Looked around the chamber. That is how humans solve problems. We try things, crazy things, impossible things, things that should not work, and sometimes, often enough to matter, they do. She pulled up a new display. It showed a timeline of human inventions. "We invented flight because two brothers who made bicycles decided they wanted to build a machine that could fly. Everyone told them it was impossible. They did it anyway. We went to our moon because a politician promised we would, before we had any idea how to do it. We created the internet by accident while trying to build a communication system that could survive nuclear war." The timeline scrolled through more examples. Penicillin, discovered because someone forgot to clean their lab equipment. X-rays, found by accident while studying something else entirely. The microwave oven, invented because someone noticed that radar equipment melted the chocolate bar in his pocket. "We do not plan our way to success," said. "We stumble into it. We make mistakes that turn into discoveries. We break things until they work. It is messy and chaotic and often very dangerous. But it is also how we have achieved things that should have taken us thousands of years in just a few centuries. Or stroked his mandibles thoughtfully. You are arguing that chaos is a form of strength. I am arguing that chaos is our form of strength. It is what makes us human. And I am arguing that this strength could be useful to the coalition if you are willing to accept the costs that come with it. And what costs would those be? Asked. He had recovered enough to participate again, though his voice was weaker than before. Smiled, and this time there was real warmth in it. We will continue to make mistakes. We will accidentally destabilize economies and contaminate cultures and paint faces on moons. We will misread your treaties and colonize the wrong planets and introduce addictive substances to unprepared populations. We will do all of this not because we want to cause harm, but because that is who we are. She spread her hands. But we will also surprise you. We will solve problems you thought were unsolvable. We will find paths that your logic says do not exist. We will survive things that should kill us, and we will help you survive them too. When the universe throws something at the coalition that all your wisdom and technology cannot handle, we will be there, ready to try something stupid that just might work. The chamber was quiet, could see the delegates thinking, weighing her words against their fears. I have one more thing to say, she added, and then I will let you vote. She looked directly at Ev, the silence monk who had called humanity the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. You are afraid of us, she said. I understand that. We are afraid of ourselves sometimes. We look at our history and we see all the terrible things we have done, all the times we almost destroyed ourselves, and we wonder if we deserve to exist at all. She took a breath. But we also see something else. We see a species that kept going. A species that faced every disaster, every plague, every war, every self-inflicted catastrophe, and refused to give up. We see a species that learned from its mistakes, even if it took us far too long. We see a species that, despite everything, still believes that tomorrow can be better than today. Her voice grew stronger. That is what humanity brings to this coalition. Not perfection, not wisdom, just the stubborn, stupid, wonderful belief that we can make things better no matter how many times we fail. She sat down. The vote took 2 hours. There were arguments and counter-arguments. Several delegates demanded additional conditions. Others argued for immediate expulsion despite everything. The silence monks said nothing, but their presence seemed to influence the proceedings in subtle ways. In the end, the vote was closer than anyone had expected. Humanity was granted continued membership in the coalition by a margin of just 3 votes. But there were new conditions. A special committee of 17 species would review all human diplomatic documents before they were signed. Human colonies would be monitored for cultural contamination. Human traders would be required to have alien supervisors until they could prove they understood local customs and laws. And the smiley face on the moon would be removed at human expense. Accepted all the conditions without argument. She knew what the humans had really won. Not just membership in the coalition, but something more important. Respect. Fear, yes, but also respect. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, High Arbiter approached her. The ancient crystalline being regarded her with what might have been curiosity. I have existed for 12,000 years, said. I have seen species rise and fall. I have watched civilizations build wonders and then crumble to dust. I thought I understood how the universe worked. Waited. Your species has existed for a fraction of that time, continued. And yet you have shown me something I never expected to see. You have shown me that survival is not just about being strong or smart or careful. Sometimes it is about being too stubborn to know when you should die. Smiled, is that a compliment? I have not decided yet. Turned to leave, then paused. We will be watching you, Ambassador, all of us. Not because we want you to fail, but because we want to understand. How does a species break every rule and still survive? What does that mean for the rest of us? Maybe you will find out, said. Maybe we will figure it out together. Made a sound that might have been a laugh. Perhaps. Or perhaps you will paint a face on one of our sons, and we will have to start this whole process over again. Winced, we would not do that, probably. Probably, repeated. That word will define humanity's relationship with this coalition for a very long time, I think. The crystalline being left stood alone in the chamber for a long moment, looking at the empty seats where the representatives of 47 species had sat. They had come here ready to cast humanity out of the galaxy. They were leaving with something far more complicated. 3 years later, the term Humanity Protocol entered the official vocabulary of the Galactic Coalition. It referred to any situation that was simultaneously disastrous, self-inflicted, and somehow survivable. The humans considered it a compliment. They were still, according to everyone else, really bad at reading the room. But they were here. They had survived. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the galaxy was slowly learning to accept that maybe, just maybe, that was enough.